I just think this is a really important conversation for us to have, and you're going to see here, you're going to see several points that we may not address them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but we're going to hit them all in the course of the next few minutes, and just talk about how we can build a healthy relationship with each other for the benefit of our students, and that works well for both of us, right? That when we have this and we have an understanding, then it makes it easier for us to teach, and it makes it easier for us to parent, and so I just think it's really valuable, and maybe it helps others to avoid some of the struggles that we hear about on a pretty regular basis. So we just want to have this conversation.
Right. And let's kind of take a look at some of the points and things that we're going to be looking at over the course of this conversation.
So we this is kind of an order, but not really, and we're gonna bounce around a lot. But I want to spend a little bit of time just talking about, as we get started, earning the right to be heard, and what that means. That we have the legal expectation that we will be in a meeting, and we have the legal right to speak, but that doesn't mean that people are going to listen to us. We earn the right to be heard, and there are a bunch of pieces that go into that. As a parent, as I talked about in another session, it's educating yourself so that you speak intelligently. Now, you don't have to be an expert in the law, but you need to know enough about it to know what the guidelines are and where the boundaries are. You need to know enough about the IEP process to understand what's about to happen here. Now, the school's going to know more about that than you do, but you at least know enough about it that you can be an informed participant.
Well, I think, Brad, coming from the educator side, that when parents do come in to the ARD meetings or into the to that type of situation that is stressful, stressful on the parents, stressful on the educator's side as well, when they walk into those conversations, the schools want parents to ask the questions. We don't know what you don't know. And so, if the parent feels comfortable enough or has a relationship, as you talk about, with the school or even some of the team members, then they're able to feel comfortable asking those questions. I think one of the worst things that can happen is to get through an entire meeting. For me, if someone says something I don't understand, I perseverate on that in my head. I can't get that out of my head, and that's all I'm thinking about, and I've missed everything that's happened afterwards. It's even like when we've talked before about when you go to a doctor and get a diagnosis. Sometimes in the diagnosis is not a good one, and that's all you hear are those words, and you can never move past that. So, I would like to encourage parents to ask those questions. If schools are using acronyms, things that they don't understand, every occupation has their own language. Education has its own language. It's okay to say, can you tell me? I don't know what that means. That will cue us as educators to go, you know what? We need to be explaining these things. We want parents to be meaningful participants. The law says that, but we really want that to occur, for them to be meaningful participants in the whole process.
So one of the encouragements I would give school in that is to slow down. When the school participants come into the meeting and they look rushed, like they left the meeting late, they've got another place to go, and they're kind of in a hurry, it leaves the impression on the family members of they invite questions, but are they really inviting? And so if we can create space around it to where we appear like we're not rushed and frantic, that we really are here for as long as we need to be here to get the best possible outcome. I think that's important, and for families to come in without the chip on their shoulder, that you're not going to have to fight for your student, that these people are here to fight with you on behalf of them. I should say that well. They're not going to fight with you. They're on your team, and so they're part of the fight to help you reach your dream, your goal, your vision for your students. So,
and I just think even with that first point, earning the right to be heard from both sides of the table. Schools don't have round tables in those
Right.
meeting rooms. So sometimes I feel like as I'm sitting across the table or some way from a parent, I don't, as an educator, that's the last thing I want is for parents to ever feel like us against them or
Mm.
them against, or we're like you talked about, walking in already with, a wall up and with adversarial ready. I know I'm going to have to fight for this. And so I think even the comment of sides of the table, let's figuratively do away with the sides of the table. We may literally have them in the room, but how can we move to a round table instead of being on other sides? Because you're right, it is the focus is that child, your child, that student, and how we help them get their best life.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before. I think there are a couple of ways, even sitting around a rectangular table with sides, that bring your child, have the child in the meeting. You have great examples of how that changes the tone of conversation. Um, uh, if the child's not there, having a picture of them or taking a minute to just envision them and what we want for them, because the meeting's about them. It's not about us. It's about them and how we help them to reach their potential. So whatever strategy we can use to make the meeting about them and the outcomes to push them down the road a little bit. That's all of those things are important to get that us versus them out of the room.
So, our next point, we talked about changing the ARD-deficit model.
So I know when Haley was in high school, especially the assistant principal who was responsible for her art meeting was Mr. Schaefer. And the first thing he did in every art meeting was go around the room and have every school person tell a story about Haley that they had seen over the course of the school year and how she had blessed them in one way or another. It might have been funny, it might have been serious, but in every way, it was pointing out to us as her parents that they saw her as a person and that they really did see her as a blessing. And so that by the time we had gotten around the room, we had heard 7 or 8 stories from school people that told us, hey, they really do care about her. And that changes everything, right? That we're in a room of people who want what's best for her, not people who are just trying to get through the meeting.
Right.
You know.
And I love that idea. And sometimes we do get so entrenched in what we have to get done because we do have to check the boxes. We do legally, we have to get through some of these things that aren't that seem very sterile and aren't as personal, that we don't, so from an educator side, just parents remembering that we do have to go through all of these pieces. We do have to do that. I think that in the same way that you're talking about how great it was to hear the people on her team to talk about her and to give stories about Haley, I would like to encourage parents to also be part of that conversation. There are things that work at home that we don't know that they worked. There are things, I had a student who had an aversion to a color word. And so if you ever use that color word, if you tried to give her that color pen, if you tried to give her that color paper, she could not, she has struggled with that. I did not know that. So I think there's that two-way street, always talking communication. It's parents telling, giving information. May not work in a classroom setting. It might not work in an education setting. However, it might.
Right.
And if we're all, again, trying to work on the same goals, trying to move to the same goal in mind, then that helps. That really helps.
Right. And I think that goes both ways. I remember Haley has a seizure disorder, and so she's taken medication forever. And when she was young, we thought the only way we could get her to take her medicine is put it in applesauce, and she'd take the applesauce and swallow it. But she needed to take it when she was with Miss Mac, her school teacher, and they didn't have applesauce, and but she needed to take it. Well, Miss Mack got her to take that pill, and well, so Miss Mack gets to report this. Haley can swallow the pill. You don't.
That's
You don't.
magic.
You don't have to have applesauce to get Haley take her medicine. Really? So it works both ways, and we all know this. Whether you have special needs kiddos or regularly, typically developing kids, that other people can get them to do some things sometimes that parents can't. And so having the relationship that allows us to try things is very helpful. But again, if we don't have a good relationship, you can be so fearful of how I might react that you won't try anything. And so building that so that we get to have that free-flowing conversation is really, really important.
And because of the paperwork and because of why we have an admission review dismissal meeting, we are there to talk about deficits. And so there is that balance, but everyone going into that meeting knows we've got to talk about these things because we have to, we've got to meet these goals. We want to, help her meet her potential. But the point, I think, for both educators and parents, as you said, is remembering the other pieces too. Don't forget the successes. Don't forget the positives. Don't forget the gifts. And those things we can use to help with that deficit model to decrease that gap that we have.
And
so.
I would just encourage you to just say that up front. There's some of this stuff that is literally just checking the boxes, and we have to do it. And it feels real clinical and sterile and cold, and we're going to do that. But we want you to know we see it as bigger than that. We see her as a student, as a person with gifts and talents, as well as struggles and challenges, and then we just jump into it.
And knowing the struggles and the challenges as you were sitting in that ARD meeting, in some of your previous sessions, you talked about asking for everything. Talk to us about a little bit more about that.
I just think stewardship is a big deal to us, and recognizing that school is no different than the typical family, and that you have limited resources. And would we like to do everything for every child? Sure, we would, but we don't have that ability. And so, for parents to do their homework, to understand that if this is where we're going, and I know I sound like a one-trick pony, but if we know what our dream and our vision for Haley is, and as she's getting older, we're starting to see the strengths that she has and the gifts that she has and the challenges that she has, then we can start to streamline our ask, right? That I remember when she was in high school, she qualified for speech therapy, but her social development was more important to us at the time, and so the time that she could have done speech was the same time they had volleyball. Well, those girls loved her and she loved them, and she was right in the middle of age-appropriate conversation every day for more than an hour, and she was only going to get like 15 minutes of speech once a week. Well, we can say no to speech because she's going to get conversational speech in volleyball, right?
And I think whether you have it's a new eligibility, a new diagnosis, you're a parent and you just discovered these things, or you've been on this journey for a while. You pointed out you want what's best. Sometimes you don't know what the best is, and so when you ask for things in an ARD meeting, or when you say my child needs, and you have a grocery list of all the things that the child needs, I really think it's important to take the time to not say, oh, my child needs HIPAA therapy because kids with autism should be on the horse and that will help them with balance and all that. Instead of putting all these things, what is it your child needs? What assessments can we do to determine the need of that child, and letting the school help you with that?
Right.
One size doesn't fit all.
Right.
and what works here doesn't necessarily work here. So individually, we need to see.
Right.
We can look and assess and address and figure out the needs of the child without 20 things on a check.
Right. I tell parents when I'm working with them that if you don't paint the face of your child on that IEP, it's going to be generic based on
Yeah.
diagnosis,
Yeah.
based on assessment, based on test scores. And it's not until we say, yeah, all those things are true about Haley, and then here's who she is as a human being, that you get to streamline that, make it less generic. But we're the ones who are responsible for that because we're the ones that are with her all the time. And so we get to paint that picture. And if we're not actively engaged in that process, then we're probably always going to be a little dissatisfied with that IEP because it will be generic.
And when you look at the law states that your student is offered a free appropriate public education. So what's appropriate doesn't necessarily mean everything under the sun.
Right.
And you mentioned earlier that, parents, sure, I want to give her everything I can. I want her to have everything she can have. I venture to say teachers would like that too.
Mhm.
But the law states that it needs to be appropriate and they need to be making progress towards their IEP.
Right.
So unfortunately, in our world, we can't provide everything that maybe we would like to.
Right. And I just think, and this is where if we can stay rational and not get overly emotional, we can make better decisions. My analogy for that is I would love to drive a Mercedes, but I drive a Honda that has 250,000 miles on it. Why? Because what I need is transportation. What I need is to be able to get back and forth to work. And that Honda does it just fine. It is appropriate for its purpose. Now, I look a lot better driving up in the Mercedes.
Especially if it's a convertible.
Well, probably not, because then I'd have a sunburned head. But recognizing what we need versus what we would like to have, and getting what you need.
And what the child needs. What the child, and again, it's mama wants, mama needs, but what drilling down and what are those needs of that particular student individually.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm not trying to brag or anything, I think I'm harder on parents than most parent advocates, because I think at the end of the day, Haley's not your responsibility to educate; she's mine. And you're part of my team, and you bring expertise to help educate her, but she's our responsibility. She's Brad and Karen's daughter, and I don't need to be handing that off to anyone. I need to be asking you to join me in doing that. And I don't get any extra privilege because she has special needs. She's still my responsibility, and I think sometimes, and I can understand because we've been there in so many ways. Sometimes I'm just tired, and I want someone else to take it for a little bit. And sometimes I'm frustrated. Sometimes I don't even know the right questions to ask, and I want somebody to say, "I'll take a turn, and I know what to do," But ultimately, it still circles back around to us, and so building the relationships in such a way that I can ask you for your expertise, and that you will understand. And I think this is important for teachers, and I talk about this a lot in the medical arena, that you have this list of things that we need to do for her in education. Well, the doctor has a list of things that we need to do in the medical arena, and other groups of people have these lists of things that we should do to help Haley reach her potential, and we need to recognize that we can't get them all done. And so it's not all about education. It's not all about medicine.
And I think that would be really hard as a parent to not feel guilt, or everybody's telling me I should do these things and I can't do these things, and and we all bring so much to that table when we sit at that art committee meeting, and you have parents who are coming in different stages of just grief and trying to work through the process. You have teachers who are coming in with a tremendous amount of things on their plate as well. And even if you haven't built a strong relationship with that person that's sitting at your table, I think it's important to remember we aren't walking in that person's shoes. They may not have it all together either as an educator. And I think there's that piece of, treat others as you'd like to be treated, or even giving each other grace in that moment, because we don't know. I think that kind of brings me to think about nonverbals when you're sitting around the table, and I talk a lot to parents, and I hear a lot from parents, and parents have the perception that maybe they're not being heard and they're not being listened to. And I talk a lot to teachers and educators about saying, you need to have the nonverbals that are showing that I am interested, because I know you are. But when people may have their head down like this, let's say a parent's like this, the educator may think, oh, what did I say? Oh, they're upset with that. Oh, they're whatever. When really they may have a headache. They may have had up all night. Same thing. And teachers over here doing this. They may have been up all night with their own child.
Right.
They may have had other things going on. And I think the relationship piece is super important to be able to speak the truth.
Yeah.
Speak the truth and be heard on both sides.
Yeah.
On both sides. Parent, do you hear me?
Right.
And educators being able to speak the truth and not be worried about, are they going to call TEA? Is this making them mad? And I'm just saying, I'm speaking the truth right now, because that is the way that where we are.
Yeah.
And I think those are really important pieces.
Sure. And so this is where relationship becomes so important, because speaking the truth, me hearing you speak hard truth about my child, is easier to hear when I know that you care about her. It was always easier to hear Ms. Mack tell us a hard truth, because I saw and we knew how invested she was in Haley. That she was not throwing that out there to take a shot at us as parents or to relieve herself of any responsibility. She thought that was an important thing for us to talk about as an art committee, to work to a solution. And that just helped. And sometimes we don't have the space to build that relationship. And I just think it's really important when we don't have the time and space. Maybe somebody's new to our community or new to our school, or a teacher has just moved in, that we just work even in that setting to be gracious with our truth. That we balance that. We all know people, right? That they I just tell the truth. I just bring it, and what you do with it is what you do with it. And I think the reality of that is that you can speak the truth in such a way that I can't hear it. It doesn't make it wrong. It's still truth, but it's you hear people say, I'm just brutally honest. Well, sometimes you're just brutal. And when your truth and your delivery of truth is brutal, then the other person can't hear it. And if you recognize that, even if we have years of relationship and you're talking about a struggle that our child has that limits their future, that's going to be hard for us to hear. You're going to have to give us a minute to breathe. And I know you had that dream that she might someday live on her own. As our kids get older, some of those things that seem so far out there become a little more real. You have to deliver that with some grace.
And that makes me think of a quote that, working together and trying to have these conversations about, two monologues don't make a dialogue. And so you're speaking yours, I'm speaking mine, when we really need to be speaking together. So let's move into on a day-to-day basis. There's some issues. I've got some, the parent has some concerns about maybe an IEP is not being followed, or a student's not getting the services that they're supposed to get. What would you say to parents on that?
It's important in every area of life, right? None of us likes for somebody to go over our head, call the supervisor. None of us. Now, all of these things are put in place because sometimes they're needed. But if we go back, we work on relationship. You and I can disagree deeply about some things, and probably get them worked out. What I tell people all the time is that no matter where the solution gets worked out, it's going to be carried out in the classroom. So why wouldn't we start at the classroom to try to work it out? And then if we can't, yeah, let's get the special ed director involved, or a principal, or whoever that next step is. And not to try to win them to our side, but we're just trying to remember, both of us, all we're doing is disagreeing about the best possible plan for our child or our student. So let's get the people in the room that can help us do that. And I have a hard time believing that someone who's never met my student can really, other than making sure that we're following the black and white of the law, can really help us find that best possible solution. And if it was that clear, I think two reasonable people would have already found it.
Right. And I think that I love that you say it that way, and I believe that's true. And if we do take ourselves out of that situation and think, oh yeah, I really wouldn't like it if that happened. So many times it's just a misunderstanding or miscommunication. It's that whole communication breakdown, and you don't need to let that fester for a whole year or until your next ARD meeting, and then it become an issue, when it could have just been dealt with on, hey, I noticed that I haven't really, or I'm wondering if you're modifying for my student in the classroom. Can you show me how you're doing that? How is that? Oh yeah, let me show you. So I think those things, again, all falling back on relationship. But you know what, Brad? Maybe that's where you have to start with your relationship building too. You may not have had the opportunity until something is an issue. And if that's the case, you still come at it in a way of hey, can you help me figure this out? Again, as working together instead of.
Yeah. And I wonder if, when we're in disagreement, if we stopped, took the time to be self-responsible, to check our own egos and our own pride, and say, am I, when I'm being questioned as an educator and it's my profession and I'm passionate about it, and somebody in some form or fashion is telling me I'm not doing it right? Because if we're in disagreement, I'm telling you that I don't think you're doing it right. Well, I take pride in my job, and so it's easy to get defensive about that. But what if I could check my pride and my ego to just have the conversation? And the same thing in reverse. What if I could check my ego as parent, that says, you do know her better, but you don't know everything. So listen and see. Chances are we're not disagreeing on the child's level or ability. We're disagreeing about strategy. And whether you're a married couple or a school couple, teacher, parent, I tell people all the time, if you're fighting over strategies, you're going to be exhausted, because there's a million ways to do just about anything. Why waste time? Why not be humble enough to say, let's try this? I'll give it your way for a while.
Right.
Let's see if it works.
Right.
And all I need from you is the humility to say, if it's not working, we'll come back and we'll try another way.
And I think it's important for both parts of the relationship. Q-tip. Quit taking it personally. It's not about you. Again, it's about why are we here?
Yeah.
She's why we're here.
Yeah.
So quit. It's not about you. It's not about me.
Right.
It's about her.
Mm-hmm. So go up the chain. And we hear stories all the time of a guy that I work with took a special education law training class. He's a lawyer, and they used a case study of a family that their IEP went to the Supreme Court, and they won at the Supreme Court. And they would tell you, they did tell them that it wasn't worth it. They won, they were right. And what they lost was 2 years of their child's education while fighting to win. So if you and I can work it out as parent and teacher, our student's going to benefit.
Well, I think these are good conversations to have. I appreciate you having the conversations with me today, and hopefully we've been able to give some information that parents and educators can benefit from.
So